We're going to be looking at some of the issues that this election experience throws up. Some technical difficulties, some other people experienced smooth encounters with the digital machines that were used. Talk about the card readers and all of that. We heard of late commencement of voting, no show in some places, even though this has also been denied in certain quarters. Extension of voting has had to be, that option has had to be taken in some places. But, well, as anchors, we're not here to talk about those. We have people in the House who are going to be analyzing all these reactions to this matter. We have in the House Mr. Gt. Ogunye. Thank you again, a legal practitioner. Thank you again for coming tonight.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
I hope you were able to get some rest.
Yes, of course, of course.
All right, yeah. All right, we have a new man for tonight in the House, although he's not also new to the House, Mr. Libros Oshoma, also a legal practitioner. Thank you very much for coming.
My pleasure.
And in our Abuja studio, we have a retired Army General, Mr. Cecil Sekhaigbe. Thank you very much for coming again tonight.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so let's get right to it, gentlemen. Mr. Libros Oshoma, what's your assessment of the whole exercise?
Depending on where each of the candidate is looking at it from, some will score INEC, high, and then why some will tell you, no, the conduct, they performed below expectations. Others would say that it was too early to praise INEC. But generally, from what I observed, if it took INEC 4 years to prepare for an election, and then also after an extension, one would have expected that with what had been put in place, that latest by 8:30, materials should arrive at polling units. But unfortunately, most of the polling units we observed, you find out that as at, in some cases, 12:30. INEC even also in the address also appreciated the fact that in some areas materials did not arrive as at when due, and then you now begin to wonder. And in other areas, even in Lagos, that on a day like this, you would say that driving from one end to the other won't take you more than 1 hour. People were still waiting for materials at 10, 10:30, 11 a.m. And so when you look at the logistics of moving materials first and foremost, for an election that was to commence at 8 a.m., for card readers that have been programmed, to commence from 8 a.m. and as at 10, in some cases 11, they were still battling with materials. And
without
in some
traffic,
other areas,
without
traffic. And in areas where materials also arrived, that in some cases they were not even complete. You find that in some areas we had to step in to douse tension, because these are some of the issues that also breed insecurity, because the tensions are heightened in certain areas where in one polling unit in Lekki, you find out that for the presidential and the senatorial, the polling ballot papers were 500. For the House of Rep, they were 400. And so they were asking the INEC official what happened to the remaining 400. And she refused to take responsibility. And in cases like that also, you now begin to ask, what did you sign for at the rack centers when you collected these materials? In some areas also, the indelible ink, INEC will arrive with materials and they tell you they don't have indelible ink. So for me, really, when you look at the general conduct, INEC also identified and admitted also that, in terms of moving materials to polling units.
Let me quickly go to Abuja. Even though even though he's a security expert, I would like to get your general sense or what the experience leaves you with, the whole conduct of today's election. As a Nigerian, not yet as a security expert, as a Nigerian, what does today's experience leave you with?
Thank you very much, Kayode. Last week when we were here, you remember I told you that there are two principal things that will cause us a lot of inconvenience during this exercise. One is the tardiness of the ad hoc staff that INEC has engaged, to execute this critical stage of the electionary process. Two, the professional misconduct of the security agencies who are going to superintend in securing the materials, securing the environment, throughout the election period. Today, the INEC has tried its best, but nothing is perfect. The process cannot be perfect. But what bothers me is that year in and year out, we don't seem to still get all these things right. The problems of 4 years ago are still rearing their heads today. So when do we get these things right? So in a general assessment, a fair assessment, but we can do better.
I was going to come back to Mr. Laboros Oshoma, because, of course, we've talked about, some of these challenges, issues with logistics, but for crying out loud, we had 4 good years. I mean, the Independent National Electoral Commission had 4 years to prepare for some of these things. But again, like he said, like the retired Army General said, these things just keep propping up over and over again, every election cycle. What is this, some kind of negligence? Is this some kind of
I think
foul play, or what's going on?
I think these things are cropping up at every turn because we excuse away this inefficiency. We always say, well, INEC has tried its best, and then people are not held accountable for ineptitude. And so when you don't do that, you hear that elections are conducted, and then once we finish the election, we forget also that the end of one election cycle begins another election cycle. And so when all of the lapses, INEC will go after the election, they will hold retreats. You expect that after the retreat, they will identify all of these lapses and find innovative ways of doing it better.
That's the word there, yeah. Another key word, innovative ways.
And so, which was why in 2011, remember, we were in the middle of the parliamentary election when the elections were stopped for logistic reasons. But what happened? The then INEC created rack centers because they discovered that as at that time, they just had centers at the local government. And to move materials from local government to most of the polling units that were far from the local government in certain areas was impossible. And that at that time, by 2 p.m., some areas were still expecting materials. So they created rack centers. Rack centers were centers lower than local government that were closer to the polling units.